fan, Taco, Zelmo, and Paul listening in, getting all this great fantasy news that you only get on Lenny Melnick Fantasy Sports. So good morning, everybody. Let's get back to talking some baseball.
So now I want to talk about one of my favorite teams in fantasy this year and some of their players, the White Sox. And so we're going to start talking about their free agent catcher, Yasmani Grandal. And Chicago White Sox manager Rick Renteria said on Monday that catcher Grandal, with his calf injury, will miss another 7 to 10 games, spring training games, in the Cactus League. Now, Grandal, during this brief hiatus and continuing hiatus, he's already been hitting. He's already been catching. He was scheduled to do some sprints on Monday. So it seems to me to be more of a cautionary and not trying to wear out or wear down their 31-year-old switch-hitting catcher during spring training. It makes sense, right? I mean, he's a veteran. He knows what to do. They're just giving him a little more time. Now, he'll have plenty of time to get ready. Let's still give him like the last 2 weeks of spring training. He'll be ready to go, maybe 3 weeks. He's 31, like I said, switch hitter, 246 average last year. But more importantly, he handles pitching stats great. But for fantasy, last year he had 28 home runs and 77 RBIs. And he threw in 5 steals to boot. So where does Yasmani rank in terms of fantasy catchers? Okay, so compare him or contrast him to JT Realmuto. I think the advantage Realmuto has over Grandal is batting average. Home runs and RBIs, I think, are square. I really do. So Grandal's average 250, Realmuto around 280. There's your difference. Realmuto doesn't run like he used to. 3 years ago, he'd steal you 15 to 20 bags. He's not going to do that. He's going to steal to maybe 10, maybe 8 to 10. He's not going to steal 20 bags anymore. Well, neither is Grandal. So is he your number 2 fantasy catcher? So here's the better comparison or contrast. Where does he rank compared, say, to, let's say, Yankee catcher Gary Sanchez? I mean, batting average, about the same. I mean, if you knew you could get a 246 out of Sanchez, particularly the way he's hit the last couple of years, you'd probably take that. 28 home runs, well, Sanchez can do that. He might get hit more than that, but he can hit 28. 77 RBIs, I think Sanchez can have more than that. So looking at those stats, he's not going to steal you any bases, Gary Sanchez. Maybe a double steal once a year. But face it, he's not going to get any stolen bases. So somewhat more power. Grandal, is he 2? Is he 3? Is he 4? Because you've also got Garver for the Twins. Garver, who hit 31 home runs last year. I'm just saying, if you're drafting catchers and you don't get Realmuto, I don't see a big rush. I don't see a big line. Let's go get Sanchez. Let's go get Grandal. Let's go get Garver. I mean, you don't see that line, folks. You can wait on a catcher. You don't have to be there to get Realmuto. The numbers are a little better, but they're not world beaters better. Is that the right phrase? Yeah. I like Grandal. I like Grandal on this team a lot. I'll tell you another player I like on this team is a pitcher. I've loved him all year last year. I've had a crush on him all spring. It's going to continue the rest of the day, week, and year. And that's Lucas Giolito. Giolito, who had, I told you yesterday, this chest injury. He has another bullpen session scheduled today. So I want to really pay close attention to the reports on the bullpen with Giolito. He strained that chest muscle early in camp. Pitchers and catchers reported a couple weeks ago now. This past year he won 14 games. He had a 3.41 ERA. Does he keep the ERA under 3.5? Maybe not. But if he doesn't, it's going to be close to it. He had 228 strikeouts in only 176 innings pitched. Does he strike out 200? You bet your dollar he does. Remember, he came over in a trade from the Nationals. He was a former first-round pick in 2012, and now he's a solid number 2 starter for the White Sox and a solid fantasy starter for this season. I just want to make sure the chest injury is not something that'll be prolonged. I want to make sure that Giolito gets his work in during spring training and gets a full spring training. You see, I think it's shown so many times, pitchers need the spring training because they build. Position players, not so much. The problem is you can't let your pitchers progress if you don't put other players on the field. And, of course, hitting takes some timing. But it's critical for these pitchers to get in the strengthening, the conditioning, the game-like conditions of spring training games, off days to recover, get in that pattern. And that's why this chest injury, the sooner the better he can heal from it. Keep your eye today. Look for reports on where does that go. Now, where do you draft Giolito? Where is he on your board? He's in my second tier. And I got some kick rear end names in my second tier. Flaherty's in my second tier. Bueller's in my second tier. Now, I'd take Giolito after those two, but not long after. Here's a good one for you, chat room podcasters. Who do you draft first this year? Do you pick, let's say they're both sitting there on silver platters. It's your pick. And there sits Lucas Giolito and Clayton Kershaw. Who do you take? There sits Lucas Giolito and Aaron Nola. Who do you take? There sits, you'll love this, don't you? There sits Lucas Giolito and Jose Barrios for the Twins. Who do you take? Here's a really tough one. There sits Lucas Giolito and Chris Sale. And who do you take? Honestly, you take that pick, do you feel like you've just wallered in mud? Or do you take that pick and you feel like you've just washed your hands clean? Because if you're really honest, at this point, you're going to take Giolito over Sale. If you're really honest, at this point, you're going to take Giolito over Kershaw. And you're going to take him over Nola. And you're going to take him over Barrios. That's what 2019 did for Lucas Giolito. So I'm interested to see where he falls in drafts. I like him more than all of those guys I just mentioned. I take him right after Bueller, right after Flaherty, right after Clevenger. I know Clevenger's hurt, but I'm still drafting him high, guys. He was hurt last year, too. Came back and pitched like incredibly well. I'm still big on Clevenger, and I'm still big on Giolito. I was listening to radio yesterday afternoon, and there was an interview done with Tony Gwynn Jr., who is the radio announcer for the San Diego Padres. And they were talking about pitching for the Padres and how Paddock was going to be the number 1 or 2 starter. I go with that. But that wasn't what I really tuned into. I know about Chris Paddock. I was really interested to hear Tony Gwynn Jr.'s analysis of Mackenzie Gore. North Carolina native Mackenzie Gore. And the word out from the interview I heard with Tony Gwynn Jr. is that Gore will be brought along slowly. He will be participating in game action. It'll take about a week from now, get into the first part of March, before Gore is on the mound. The same can be said of Luis Patino. Gore is baseball's number 5 overall prospect. Patino number 27. They barely scratched the surface in Double-A last year. They combined for under 30 innings in Double-A last year. So they're both expected Notice I said expected to start the year in the minor leagues. But depending on what happens with the Padres may well determine the fate of Gore and Petito in 2020. And that was the point of the interview. If the Padres, here was the point he made. If the Padres last year, who were 2 games out of the wild card at the All-Star break, are 2 games out of the wild card this year at a similar stage, the Padre brass is saying we will probably bring up Gore and or Patino or both to pitch in the major leagues this year. As evidenced by the fact, remember last year when their star shortstop was projected to begin the year in the minor leagues, and that star shortstop, Fernando Tatis Jr., began the year at the major leagues playing for the San Diego Padres. Gore's current ADP of 300, certain to rise, particularly after this podcast today, right? People are going to hear this podcast across the world, and they're going to say, but Arnie said. Well, Arnie heard it from Tony Gwynn Jr., who's talking to the general managers and the managers. Patino's ADP 699. So will they participate? Probably. Here's the problem. If they both get caught up and people go crazy over picking these guys up off waivers or crazy over activating off your reserve minor league rosters, the problem is limited innings in 2020. They did it with Paddock last year. Remember, they'd send him down to the minors. They'd bring him up. They'd send him for a start. They'd bring him up. They're going to do the same thing with these two. Mackenzie Gore and Luis Patino are not going to pitch 150 innings at the major league level this year. Even if they're caught up in midseason, they're not going to pitch all year. They're going to be limited. I could almost see them playing these two players as one. Letting one pitch for a little while and send him down while the other one comes up and pitch a little while and then send him down. And, it's sort of like this revolving door between the two, between Patino and Gore. But my point being, they're probably, if the Padres are relevant in reality, Gore and Patino may well be relevant in fantasy come midseason. You heard it from me. Would I tell you anything wrong? Remember, I'm the one who told you last year, you heard me on my podcast, the Nationals, I told you in May, when the Nationals were 19-31, I think they're going to be a player in the playoffs. Well, I would say a World Series champion was certainly a playoff player. So I've done my homework on this one. And a player that I have really looked forward to seeing, he really got his Casbah rocked yesterday. The Clash would have loved singing that song because his Casbah was rocked. Who am I talking about? Sean Manaea. Talking about getting hit hard. It was like Ali and Frazier. Just that Manaea was getting hit by both of them. He got pulled in the second inning. Now, he cruised through a 12-pitch first inning, and then he allowed 3 straight doubles and a 2-run homer, and then he was gone. I know you can't take much from one spring start. I got that. And Manaea was probably working on pitches. But yesterday he looked horrible. Now, contrast that to last year. At the end of last year, in his last 29 and 2/3 innings last season, Manaea had a 1.21 ERA, and I think that is a lot more indicative of what Sean Manaea can do than what we saw yesterday. Remember, he's in the rotation. He's working on new pitches or trying to, try different things. He's not caring about giving up doubles and home runs in his first spring training game of the year. He's healthy. He's going to be okay. But he was solid slammed on Monday. Now, also good to go, Chris Davis with a K. Now, remember I told you in previous shows, I believe a lot of Chris Davis's problems in 2019 were health-related, whether it be an oblique, whether it be a calf. There was always something going on. He was never healthy, and he didn't hit the 47 or 49 homers that we're accustomed to. And he's tinkering with his calf muscle. but he will be in the lineup on Tuesday against the Padres.